Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Adobe Live. Welcome to the Creative Kickoff. For those of you who are on the West Coast, and it's still morning, so this is your morning kickoff. For those of you here in the Eastern time zone, good afternoon, happy lunch. This is your lunch kickoff. And for those of you like Nicholas that are abroad, this is your good night kickoff. So we're just going to kick off your day, afternoon, or evening using a little Photoshop. And today we're also going to introduce a little Lightroom to the stream. So I see a bunch of people coming in already. I see people on YouTube, Facebook. Hello, Susanna. Hello, Tim Dalton. Hello, is that Carson? Carson DC1 over on YouTube. And of course, Frank, Victoria, and our moderator, Voodoo Val, over on Adobe Live. So if you are watching on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, Twitch, great, you can hang out there. But if you want to participate in the main chat, head over to b.net/Adobe Live. That's where the main chat is going to be happening. I will try and look at the questions in both sets of chats, but I may not get to them. And also the moderators can also answer questions in the Adobe Live chat that I don't get a chance to get to. So with that said, welcome everyone. Looks like we got a big crowd today in both streams. So we're going to go ahead and just dive right into today's topic. So today's topic is all about the Lightroom or Lightroom Classic, whichever one you're using, to Photoshop workflow and back. So we're going to talk about some reasons why you would use Lightroom and Photoshop together. We'll talk about some reasons why Photoshop users would say, hey, what do I need Lightroom for? And Lightroom users would say, hey, what do I need Photoshop users for, or Photoshop for? We're going to tackle that. And my plan in the next 22 minutes is to cover it on 3 platforms. 4 if you count the difference between Lightroom and Lightroom Classic, but at least 3 different hardware platforms, and add in a 4th for different apps as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my desktop, which I'm going to start off in Lightroom Classic. So Lightroom Classic, it was first, so we may as well start off in that. And we've had this workflow for years where you could start with a photo or that you took and you organized in Lightroom Classic. And if you needed to do more to it, you could head over to Photoshop with it automatically with a workflow and do whatever you wanted to do, add layers, make changes, delete pixels, whatever you want to do, non-destructively or destructively, and then save it and come back to Lightroom, and it will bring back the saved version without destroying or editing your original. So that's the workflow. But before we get there, I want to point out here, we're going to go to our preferences, and one of the first things I want my Lightroom Classic users to do is go to your external editing tab, and you're going to choose 2 things. Since nowadays we usually have 2 versions of Photoshop installed on our computer, you might want to go in and choose which version of Photoshop you want this edit to take place in by default. So if neither one is opened, it will use whatever you choose here. If one of them is opened, that's the one it will use. So you don't have to go change it every time. Just open up the Photoshop you want it to use if it's different than your default. Okay, so in my case, I do want it to use the beta. And the second thing I said I would have you change, or at least look at changing, this defaults to TIFF. And TIFF is okay. There's nothing wrong with it. It supports layers. Obviously, it's the default for a reason. But I don't know. I just feel more comfortable if the edits I do in Lightroom Classic to Photoshop come back as PSDs. Photoshop documents, for those that don't know what PSD stands for. So that's the only other thing that's an optional. You don't have to change that. You can leave it on TIFF, but I like to have that on PSD. It just makes me feel more warm and fuzzy. All right, so functionally it shouldn't be any different. Anyway, so let's go in and tackle this workflow. So I'm going to I have a raw file here. This is from straight out of camera, no edits done to it. We're going to do some edits to it in Lightroom first, and then we're going to do some edits to it in Photoshop. And before we do that, let me answer one of those questions I get right off the bat. Well, hey, I'm a Photoshop user. Why do I even need Lightroom? And if you're a Photoshop user and a designer, yeah, you probably don't need Lightroom. But if you're a photographer you do need Lightroom. You need something to manage and store all these images in, or just even organize. So I have 236,481 assets in Lightroom Classic. Now they could be photos, videos. That's pretty much it. Photos or videos. So 236,000. So basically almost 250,000 assets being managed by Lightroom Classic. I can't do that in Photoshop. So that's the why Lightroom to a Photoshop user. Now let's answer the flip side of that coin. Why Photoshop to a Lightroom user? And I'm about to show you why. So let's head over to the Develop module. And in the Develop module, I'm going to do a couple things that I always do. I'm going to go ahead and choose the starting profile for this kind of shot. So I can either use Adobe's portrait, which is kind of generic, or use the portrait from the camera settings, meaning if your camera has a profile, it will pick that one and use that one. So this is using my Nikon camera portrait profile that came from my camera. All right, now this image is a little dark for my taste. Like a lot of stuff is getting lost in the shadows. So I could start making a bunch of adjustments here and try and get it the way I want. But I always start with auto, because auto is going to move a lot of sliders the way I would want, even if it moves some the way I don't want. It's easier to fix the couple that it didn't get right than to do them all from scratch. So I hit auto, and sure enough, that gave me pretty much what I wanted. I would tone down the exposure a little bit more. So that would be the one I would say, no, that's not quite what I want. Now I would also look at the shadows and see if there's anything being clipped. And there's a little area right in here that's being clipped, and I don't really care about that because that's about to be replaced anyway. All right, so now we got our shot toned the way I want. So I've adjusted the tonality of the shot and I got it the way I want. But there's a bigger problem with the shot. There's too many distracting elements all around it. So what I really want to do is replace the background. Now this was shot at my home studio. So this is like on the first floor there. And I don't need all this crap on the wall. I don't need all these pictures. I don't need this stuff in the dining room. I don't need any of this. So if I want to replace all that, I can't do that in Lightroom. Lightroom doesn't have any of those capabilities. Lightroom just got generative remove, so I could start removing piece by piece by piece by piece, but that would be tedious and it still wouldn't give me the background that I want. So that's a job for Photoshop, and that's when we head over to Photoshop. Now, how do we get there? We can go in and we can choose. I don't even do this from the menu, so pardon me while I find it because I always do a keyboard shortcut. But there is a edit in, there it is, edit in Photoshop. So it's Command E or Control E on Windows, and that's why I said I don't remember where it is because I always do it from the keyboard. So now, because this is a RAW file, meaning it's not a JPEG, it will just automatically open up a copy in Photoshop because you can't edit a RAW file via pixels. You can only make adjustments to it that are non-destructive. So it has no choice but to make a copy. But if this were a JPEG or PNG or some other format, it will then prompt me, do you want to open a copy? Do you want to open the original? Do you want to open a copy with the Lightroom adjustments you've already made? Which obviously that's what I'd want to do. But I just hit Command E and we wait a second or two and it should pop up Photoshop just like that. So Photoshop's now open. I can zoom in a little bit, and I'm ready to start doing everything Photoshop can do. And this is the magic of Photoshop, is that I don't have any limits. I can literally do just about anything. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a new thing. I'm going to say remove background. Now, this is AI. So AI doesn't always get things right, and you're about to see an example of it not getting it quite right. So let me show you an example. Look at the photo, look at her dress, remove background. We give it a second, and yep, it removed the background, but it removed the top part of the dress that was hanging down behind her, because that's background as far as the AI is concerned. So I could live with this. This is okay, but that's not quite what I want. I want that whole part that's in the back. I want part of the background for this. So I'm going to do a manual fix for this. I'm going to hold down my Shift key, and I'm going to click the mask to just turn the mask off temporarily, because that's all it did, is it created a mask of the background in the layers panel. So I'm going to turn that mask off. Now I'm going to say, oh, wait, don't get rid of that red part behind her head, even though it's background, I do want that. So I'm going to go to my object selection tool, and just to make it easier, we'll use the AI-based object selection tool, and it will make a selection of that object, hopefully. Give it a second here, let it think about it, and it's thinking about it, and it did just that. It made that selection of that piece behind her head. Now I'll turn the mask back on. Shift, click the mask, but that selection is still there. We don't see it, but I see the marching ants in the area where I made the selection. Now I'll just fill that in with white, because white is on a mask is reveal. So Option or Alt Delete fills that in with white, and then I get my piece back. Now I didn't do a great selection around her hair, so no problem. I'll just grab my white paintbrush and just paint around it, because that's just revealing all that red that should be there, including under the arm in case it missed that too. Great, now I got the selection I want. I got the background gone. I've got her dress still there, which was part of the background. And now I can do something else that Photoshop can do, which is brand new, generate a new background. If I had a background I wanted to use, I can just import background, grab my photo, plop it in, and away I go. But in this case, I actually want to generate a new one. So we'll generate background, and we're going to do elegant castle staircase. So that is my prompt in the contextual tool, or contextual taskbar, I should say. Elegant castle, here, let me move it out from behind my head. Elegant castle staircase. So now we'll hit generate. And while that is generating, let me turn off Do Not Disturb on my other device, or turn on Do Not Disturb. And we'll give it a few seconds for Photoshop to generate a new layer, a new background that should take into account the subject and, again, match the perspective and lighting and shadows and all that cool stuff. There's just no way I could do that in Lightroom. So there's that. There's that. And I know which one I like the best. I like the first one best. I just fell in love with that one immediately when I saw it. Okay, so now I got a layer. That layer is non-destructive. I can turn it off and come back to this. I can generate more. I can generate different backgrounds. I can do any of those things because that is just the background. Hey, Deb Davis. Hey, Andrew Kavanaugh. How are you? So let's go ahead and save that. Now that's saving it with all the layers intact, everything I just did. So it's going to take a few seconds to save. It's happening behind my head there. You see the progress bar at the bottom. And it's saving it to the original location of the original photo. So wherever that photo was in Lightroom Classic stored on your hard drive, it's saving this PSD in the same folder, in the same location, on the same drive as that item. Or that original. So it's putting it right next to for the raw file. And that was a 48 megapixel raw file, so it takes a second. All right, so now let's close that. Let's head back over to Lightroom Classic, and there it is in Lightroom Classic. There's my original, untouched. So my original, untouched, just the Lightroom adjustments, which are non-destructive. I can always go back and make changes. And there is the Photoshop version of it with the generated background that I can still go back into Photoshop and do more to if I want. So that is how we round trip from Lightroom Classic to Photoshop and back. Is it different for Lightroom on desktop? Let's go. Let's take a look. Lightroom on desktop. And by the way, that photo will sync into here eventually. Lightroom on desktop is very similar. So for example, let me go ahead and just pick a photo here. And the keyboard shortcut is different. There is also no preference to choose there's the photo that just popped in. There's no preference to choose the format. It's going to always come back as a TIFF. It will automatically default to a copy, even if it's a JPEG. So a lot of things it does for you that you don't have to make those choices inside of Lightroom Classic, or you don't have to make those choices inside of Lightroom's preferences like you have to do for Lightroom Classic. So now, the other thing that's different is the keyboard shortcut. So if I go to if I go again, not remembering where it is, if I go photo, it's probably under photo or edit, or maybe even file. I'm just looking forward to show it to you. There it is, edit in Photoshop. It's Command Shift E, just to make things challenging for me to remember. All right, so I just got to remember that when I'm in Lightroom, it's Command E, or when I'm in Lightroom Classic, it's Command E. When I'm in Lightroom, it's Command, I'm sorry. When I'm in Lightroom Classic, it's Command E. When I'm in Lightroom Desktop, it is meaning the cloud version, as some of you call it, it is Command Shift E, because Command E is dedicated to export. All right, so now I'll go ahead and do the edit in, so it's telling me what's going to happen. I can make edits, keep Lightroom open, close the photo in Photoshop to bring it back. So it's just telling me what to do. It pops it open into Lightroom, or I'm sorry, into Photoshop, and I'm in the beta, so that was the one that was open. I can now go in and do whatever I want. So if I want to grab the new AI-based remove tool, I can, is that the, no, that's not it. This is it. So there we go, AI-based remove tool. And I'm just going to take a shot at removing this person that's distracting from our wildlife there. And we'll give it a second to do that. So this is not using generative fill. This is using the surrounding pixels. So the results will be different. So for people that say, hey, I don't want to use any pixels that I didn't take, this will be the tool to use. For people that also say, I want to keep it at the exact same resolution, this will be the tool to use. For people that say, I need it to fill in with things that weren't there before, then you would use the you use generative fill. So I don't get multiple choices. I don't get anything else. This is it. So I could have duplicated that layer first, but again, if I just save this now, it's saving it. It was a smaller file, so it didn't take as long. When I come back, it's bringing it back now. It's importing it. Oh, and it brought it down to bottom. It added it to the bottom, and it added it as a stack. So Lightroom stacks the two results together. There's the original on the right, the new one on the left, the TIFF file. If I were to click on it, yep, it says that it's a .tif. So it is a TIFF file, and that's the way it comes back into Lightroom. Now, I can still move them back up in my sort order if I want. So if I don't want that at the bottom, I can go ahead and move that all the way back up. Let's move it back up here. So it's where I had it originally, and we'll put it like right there. Great. Okay, so those are the two photos, and that's the way Lightroom handles it. Now let's switch platforms. Let's go to a different platform. Let's go over to the iPad. So on the iPad, we've got Lightroom running, same album, same photos are changing and editing behind the scenes via the cloud sync. That's great. And now I want to take one of these photos like this one, and I'm now just using my finger. I didn't bring my Apple Pencil up here, but I could use my Apple Pencil and make any edits or changes that way. But I'm going to go ahead and say that I need to I want to add something to this photo that doesn't exist. But I'm on my iPad and I can't do that in Lightroom. But I can share it and edit in Photoshop. So there's an edit in Photoshop midway down that share menu. And when I edit in Photoshop, it's doing it. It's writing a Photoshop file. So it's just making the file first, the copy. Here I am in Photoshop. I've got my selection tool all set and ready to go. I'm just going to go ahead and make a selection here. In this area in the bottom right hand corner, my contextual taskbar appears. I'm going to do generative fill. I'm going to do a brown suitcase. All right, brown suitcase, generate. So this is using the same power of generative fill that you have in Photoshop on desktop. It's doing it now here on Photoshop on iPad. So, and it will make a layer. It will give me the multiple choices, just like it does on Photoshop on desktop. Sorry, my screen flipped out a couple seconds there. It sometimes switches between where it thinks it needs to mirror versus external display. But it's almost done generating. I love that 99% and still makes you wait. 100% still making me wait. Come on, you're done. You're at 100%. Ah, only when I'm live. Only when I'm live, you'll have to wait at 100%. All right. I'll give it 2 more seconds. And it gave me a problem. Service is not responding. That could be a issue with our servers. Let me do it one more time, and I'll let that cook in the background while I go on to my third example. It's moving quicker. Let's see what happens. And like I said, if not, I'll just move on to my third example and let that finish in the background, or not. Just thinking about it. That last little bit at the end. %. Come on. All right, while I'm waiting, let me get the other one ready to go. All right, I'm going to move on. If it gives me the same error, it could be an issue with the server. If not, I'll come back to the result. I'll switch back over to my computer. So third example is, it gave me the same error, by the way. Third example is I am now on my web browser. So you can see in the upper left-hand corner, I'm actually running Chrome. I'm at a website called lightroom.adobe.com because Lightroom Web is an option as well. So in Lightroom Web, I can go into my photo, I can make adjustments to my photo. Here in the web browser, it's bringing up the same synced photos that I had before. And I also have one more new choice here for Lightroom on web. I can do a share, and there's expand in Photoshop. But wait a minute, I'm in my web browser. Well, Photoshop is also in the web browser. So here it is, opening Photoshop on the web with that same image that it took over. And we'll give it a second there. And I'm already in the crop because I said I wanted to do a generative expand. I'm just going to move my crop over more. And then I'm going to hit generative expand to have it generate the rest of this lake. I could type in what I want in the prompt, but I'm just going to have it generate. In other words, fill in that other area. All right, we'll give it a second to do that. And we're getting down to that 94, 95, 100%, and this one is working as expected. So it gave me the rest of that. It gave me 3 choices to choose from, just like on desktop. And I like that one a lot. That one actually looks more real life because this lake is near my house. So that actually looks the way that lake would look if I had not cropped it off in my shot. So there we are. That is generative expand, and then now when I'm done, I can say send to Lightroom to send a copy of this back to Lightroom, and it says successfully sent over. Now the difference is Lightroom Classic and Lightroom on desktop, when you send it back, it automatically puts it in the same album. This does not yet. So this, when I say open it, it's just going to put it at the top of my all photos. And so there it is in Lightroom. If I were to go out of it, it would be in my all photos, and that's the difference. Okay, so that is your workflow from Lightroom, Lightroom Classic, Lightroom on mobile, and Lightroom on web to Photoshop on all those different platforms. So it's amazing the time we live in that we can do this easily and this quickly. So pick your platform, pick your use cases. Whenever you think you need to do more than Lightroom can do, no problem. Take it over to Photoshop, even on iPad. I was just looking at the iPad there for a second. Even on iPad, it does work. It worked earlier. That's why I was like thrown off. But anyway, check it out. Check out Lightroom, Lightroom Classic, Photoshop on all your different platforms, Mac, Windows, iPad, web, and give it a shot. All right, we'll catch you on the next one. Cheers, everybody. Stay tuned for more.